people will call and they have tax debts from years that could have been discharged if they had only filed their tax returns on time. So let me walk through the three basic requirements that have to be met for an income tax debt to be dischargeable in bankruptcy. We call it the 3-year, 2-year, 240-day requirement. First, the 3-year requirement. The tax return for the given tax year must have been due, with extensions if you got them, at least 3 years before the day you filed the bankruptcy petition. That one's pretty straightforward. For example, let's say you were trying to get rid of 2018. When's that tax return due? It's due in April of 2019, 3 years later, April of 2022, which from our perspective is in the rear view mirror of life. One does have to be a little careful if the IRS changes the due date, such as for 2019 because of COVID, the due date was extended to July, so it wasn't April. And some years there are holidays that push it beyond April 15th. Some years it can be April 16th or even April 17th. And then, of course, if you get an extension, then it's October. So that's the first requirement, which does not state anything about whether or not you actually filed a tax return. The second requirement, that 2-year requirement, is really where a lot of people are getting hung up. What this requirement says is you must have filed a legitimate, non-fraudulent tax return for the given tax year at least 2 years before the day you filed your bankruptcy petition. Now, I'll have people say, well, I couldn't pay the tax, so I didn't bother to file the tax return. Well, if you don't file the tax return, you're out of luck. This is a requirement for discharging that tax debt in bankruptcy, and even outside of bankruptcy. If you want to enter into a payment plan with the IRS, whether it's an installment agreement or an offer in compromise, you must have filed the tax return. So it's absolutely crucial you file, and you want to file on time. Now, in some parts of the country, if you file even 1 day late, the tax is never dischargeable in bankruptcy. For example, in the Fifth Circuit, which encompasses Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, if you file your income tax return 1 day late, you lose. End of discussion, no mercy. A bit draconian, it's referred to as the McCoy rule because the case involved a person named McCoy. In the Ninth Circuit, where I practice, that draconian rule is not in effect, in part because the Ninth Circuit's never addressed the question, if you file the return late, does that preclude it from being discharged in bankruptcy? So you want to file the return on time. Now, if you don't file, eventually the taxing authority, whether it's the IRS or the Franchise Tax Board here in California, will file a return on your behalf called a substitute for return. If that happens, you can never discharge that tax debt in bankruptcy, even if you subsequently file a return, which would be considered an amended return. You just lose. So you really have to file those returns on time. And then the third requirement is the 240-day rule. And that says that the tax you're seeking to discharge cannot have been assessed or be assessable during the 240-day window immediately prior to the day you filed your bankruptcy petition. Since 8 times 3 is 24, 8 times 30 is 240, so it's 8 30-day months. Now, you'll notice I said or assessable. That means if the taxing authority decides to audit your case, then there could be additional tax assessed. And if they haven't done that yet, then the tax is still assessable. That's why when you file the return, you want it to be squeaky clean, absolutely audit proof. You've listed every penny of income. You've listed the deductions accurately. You haven't padded anything. It's absolutely honest. That way, you don't have that problem where, well, the tax could have been assessed. So absolutely, you must file your return on time and have it audit proof. And it doesn't matter whether or not you can pay the tax. file the return anyway, because at least you will make sure that if subsequently you have to file a bankruptcy case and enough time has passed, then you can discharge that debt. Now, if you've been in a prior bankruptcy case during the pendency of those deadlines, that stops the clock, and then once you get out, then we have to add additional time in addition to the amount of time that was still left on that clock. And if you've been in an offer in compromise, the same sort of thing holds. In any event, file your returns on time if you want to have hope of getting a tax debt discharged in bankruptcy.